On October 12th, a barrel was found floating in the San Diego Bay. Inside were the remains of Omar Medina, and he had been stabbed approximately 66 times.
And they could see a brown blanket and what was a human hand sticking out from the blanket. So then, in fact, we knew we had a human body, and it was a homicide investigation began at that point.
Out in El Cajon, from search warrants, they were able to locate the boat that was used to dispose of the barrel in the bay. On the video surveillance that we found from October 11th, which was the day before the barrel was discovered, you could see a green truck that was being driven, towing a bass tracker boat, and in the bed of the truck was a white 55-gallon drum.
Familial love is an extraordinary power that illuminates the darkest of corners. When her younger brother Omar suddenly vanished without a trace, Alicia's world fell apart. Instead of surrendering to the dead ends and dismissive answers from the authorities, she took it upon herself to embark on a journey to find the truth. Driven by fierce love and an unyielding will, the devoted sister patiently uncovered every single clue. No matter how small, this stands as the ultimate testament to justice. The foundation of any family is built on presence, the comforting certainty that the people you love will simply be there. For Alicia Villegas and her younger brother, Omar Medina, this bond was the very center of their lives. They were far more than just siblings navigating life under the same roof. They were confidants, best friends, and a constant source of mutual emotional support. Their relationship was woven through the fabric of everyday moments, multiple phone calls throughout the day, endless text exchanges sharing mundane details, and the kind of deep unspoken understanding that only a tightly knit family can share. Omar was a vibrant, loving presence, a devoted uncle to Alicia's children, and someone who always made sure his sister knew exactly where he was and what he was doing. This established rhythm of constant, transparent communication was their normal, a reassuring heartbeat of their familial connection. It was precisely this unwavering reliability that made the events of September 30th, 2017 so profoundly unsettling. As the evening of that late September day began to settle, the air in their family home was filled with the ordinary anticipation of Omar's return. He had previously made plans to meet up with his loved ones later that night, a routine weekend gathering that no one thought twice about. However, as the hours quietly slipped by, the familiar sound of his footsteps at the front door never materialized. The house remained strangely, uncomfortably quiet. At first, the absence was treated as a minor disruption, a small pebble in the calm waters of their daily routine. It was easy to find logical, harmless explanations. Perhaps he had run into an old friend, or maybe he was just running late after a long day. Yet, as the night deepened, the sudden silence from his end grew increasingly loud and entirely out of character. The total cessation of his communication was inexplicable. In an era where everyone is just a screen tap away, Omar had essentially vanished from the digital grid. Alicia, actively trying to anchor herself in reason and ward off the creeping shadows of panic, attempted to rationalize the situation. She desperately wanted to believe that this was just a temporary lapse, a simple misunderstanding that would be easily resolved with an apologetic phone call the very next morning. Sitting in the quiet of her room, illuminated only by the glow of her smartphone, she traced his digital steps, looking for any sign of life.
I'm like, okay, where's he at? Alicia later recalled, the memory of that initial confusion still vivid. So I sent him a message, and I saw that in Messenger that he received it. So I'm like, okay, his phone's on. He received my message. He'll answer me later.
It meant his device was active, resting in his pocket or on a table somewhere, tethering him to the world. She clung fiercely to the belief that he was simply caught up in the moment, distracted, and would eventually reply when he had the chance. She forced herself to go to bed that night, actively suppressing the rising tide of worry, telling herself that the morning light would bring her brother's familiar smile and a perfectly reasonable explanation for the silence. She did not realize yet that this heavy, unsettling stillness was not a temporary pause, but the agonizing beginning of a heartbreaking mystery. The fragile hope that sustained Alicia through the first sleepless night rapidly dissolved as the clock relentlessly ticked forward. 48 agonizing hours had passed since anyone had last seen or heard from Omar. In the modern world, a person's digital footprint serves as a constant pulse. Yet Omar's had completely flatlined. There were no outgoing calls, no messages read or sent, and most alarmingly, zero activity on his bank accounts. For a vibrant young man who relied on his phone and debit card daily, this sudden, total cessation of activity was not just unusual, It was a blaring alarm. The silence that initially felt like a mere pause had now mutated into a suffocating void. Driven by a mounting, undeniable sense of dread, Alicia realized that waiting was no longer an option. She needed professionals. She needed the resources of law enforcement to locate her brother. With her heart pounding with both fear and the expectation of immediate assistance, Alicia went to the local police department to file an official missing person report. She carried with her the absolute certainty of a sister who knew her sibling's soul. Omar would never intentionally inflict this kind of agonizing worry on his family without warning. However, upon arriving at the station, she crashed into a cold, rigid wall of administrative bureaucracy. Instead of the swift, urgent mobilization she desperately hoped for, she was met with procedural hurdles and a dishearteningly pragmatic perspective. The authorities, operating strictly by the book, viewed the situation through an entirely different lens. To them, there were no immediate, physical signs of a struggle, no ransacked room, and no explicit evidence of danger. They patiently explained the legal reality of the situation. It is not a legal issue for a grown adult to simply walk away from their life. People occasionally sever ties, need temporary space, or decide to start over without informing their relatives. The officers argued that, without concrete proof of an involuntary disappearance, their hands were tied by protocol. The dismissal of her profound family intuition was a devastating blow. The very system designed to protect citizens seemed to be looking the other way, relying on standard technicalities rather than the glaringly obvious deviations in Omar's established character. Reflecting on that crushing moment of institutional rejection, Alicia later shared the agonizing reality of her plea for help.
If somebody is over the age of 18, and unless they have a medical condition, they will not go look for them. That's, what I was told. When you're an adult, you can go missing.
She was essentially told to go home and wait for a man who she knew, deep in her bones, was unable to return. The authorities had firmly drawn their line in the sand, but as the administrative doors closed on her, a fierce protective resolve ignited within Alicia. If the system refused to step in and search for her little brother, she would simply have to go out and find the answers herself. Refusing to be paralyzed by the police department's initial administrative dismissal, Alicia transformed her profound despair into relentless, organized action. She inherently knew that every passing hour was critical, and sitting idle in an empty house was simply not an option. If the authorities would not step in to search for her brother, she would build her own task force. Mobilizing a dedicated grassroots effort, she gathered her closest friends, concerned family members, and compassionate volunteers from her local church congregation. Together, they effectively became the search and rescue team that the system had denied her. They printed hundreds of missing person flyers featuring Omar's smiling face, methodically taping them to telephone poles, community notice boards, and local storefront windows across the city. Simultaneously, Alicia functioned as a one-woman dispatch center, spending countless hours on the phone systematically contacting every hospital, clinic, and medical facility in the surrounding county, desperately praying that someone had admitted him. Days slowly blurred into one another, characterized by exhausting foot patrols through unfamiliar neighborhoods and the heavy, agonizing weight of ongoing silence. Despite the physical exhaustion and emotional toll, her determination never wavered. Then, more than a week into this grueling self-directed investigation, their unwavering persistence finally yielded a massive breakthrough. While canvassing the streets on October 7th, members of her search party stumbled upon a crucial physical piece of the puzzle that changed the entire trajectory of the case.
I get a call. Hey, we found your brother's car. You need to come down here, like right now, Alicia recalled, describing the overwhelming rush of adrenaline, relief, and sheer panic that washed over her at that exact moment. It was only like 2-3 blocks away from where Omar lived.
Rushing immediately to the scene, Alicia saw the vehicle and instantly recognized that the circumstances were entirely wrong. Omar's car was parked haphazardly on a quiet residential street, an illogical location for someone who had supposedly packed up his life to willingly move away. As she cautiously approached the vehicle, the alarming red flags only multiplied. The car doors were completely unlocked, a highly unusual oversight. Peering through the windows, she was shocked to see his valuable personal belongings, expensive items, electronics, and everyday essentials he would never voluntarily abandon, just sitting there, carelessly stacked on the seats. It was a chaotic, unnatural scene. Trusting her instincts, Alicia carefully inspected the car's interior, desperately hunting for any thread that could trace his final steps. Tucked away among his possessions, she discovered a tiny, seemingly insignificant piece of paper, a recent shopping receipt from a local store, bearing a timestamp from the exact night he vanished. This fragile slip of paper was the monumental, undeniable proof she had been looking for. It definitively established a concrete timeline and proved his routine was interrupted abruptly. Armed with this undeniable physical evidence, Alicia returned to the precinct. She had single-handedly uncovered the clues, effectively forcing the authorities to finally open a formal, urgent investigation. Armed with the freshly discovered receipt and the highly suspicious condition of the abandoned, unlocked vehicle, Alicia finally possessed the undeniable proof required to shift the authorities' perspective. The police could no longer dismiss Omar's absence as a simple, voluntary departure by an adult. The physical evidence strongly suggested that his routine had been abruptly and unnaturally interrupted. Recognizing the escalating gravity of the situation, law enforcement officers officially mobilized, launching a formal investigation. Their first critical step was to visit the very last place Omar was known to have been, his rented accommodation. This time, they arrived with a renewed sense of urgency, their uniforms equipped with active body cameras to meticulously document every single detail of what was rapidly becoming a highly concerning location. Upon arriving at the residential property, the officers were greeted at the front door by Timothy Cook, the landlord who leased a small detached unit in the backyard to Omar. Outwardly, Cook appeared entirely calm and cooperative, yet his answers held a subtle, evasive quality. Standing on the porch, he confidently reiterated the exact same narrative he had previously fed to Alicia. He smoothly insisted that Omar had simply decided to leave, packing up his belongings, and moving out entirely on his own accord more than a week prior. According to Cook's uninterrupted version of events, there was absolutely nothing amiss. It was merely a standard, unremarkable departure of a tenant moving on to a new place. However, the physical reality waiting just a few feet away was about to loudly and chillingly contradict his casual story. Seeking to verify his claims, the officers requested permission to walk to the back of the property and visually inspect the detached unit. As they approached the small, standalone structure, an overwhelming and harsh chemical odor heavily permeated the air, the sharp, unmistakable, and stinging scent of industrial bleach. Stepping across the threshold, the officers were instantly met with a baffling and deeply alarming sight. The living space had not just been vacated, it had been systematically, aggressively, and inexplicably dismantled. The interior was completely gutted, stripped down to its bare structural bones in a manner that defied any logical explanation for a standard move-out. The flooring had been aggressively ripped up from the foundation, leaving only the raw subfloor exposed and uneven. Large, jagged sections of the drywall had been entirely torn away from the wooden studs, creating a chaotic, messy landscape of debris. Puddles of water and various scattered cleaning materials were haphazardly left across the gutted room, strongly suggesting a recent, frantic, and extraordinarily thorough scrubbing of the entire enclosed area. The sheer scale of the structural destruction, combined with the excessive application of harsh chemical agents, pointed to a deeply troubling conclusion. It was a glaringly obvious intentional effort to erase physical traces and completely sanitize the environment. The dismantled walls and the suffocating scent of bleach served as a silent, terrifying confirmation that a massive, calculated cover-up had taken place, right there. While the gutted, bleach-soaked room in Chula Vista painted a deeply troubling picture, the definitive and most devastating answer to Omar's disappearance would emerge miles away, from the cold, unpredictable waters of the Pacific. On a seemingly ordinary October day, a marine worker navigating the calm surface of the San Diego Bay noticed a strange, large object floating in the distance. As the boat drew closer, the hazard revealed itself to be a heavy metal barrel. It was an eerie sight, completely out of place in the open water. A closer inspection by the responding harbor police revealed a chilling detail. Thick steel cables and heavy concrete cinder blocks had been deliberately attached to the base of the drum. It was abundantly clear that whoever had discarded this object intended for it to sink to the ocean floor and remain a hidden secret forever. Yet defying those dark intentions, the barrel had broken the surface, refusing to let the truth stay buried in the depths. The harbor patrol safely retrieved the heavy container and transported it to the medical examiner's office, where professionals carefully and respectfully opened it. Inside, they found the heartbreaking presence of a human being. The medical authorities immediately began their examination to understand what had transpired. Their findings were grim and conclusive. The individual had passed away as the direct result of a fatal attack by another person. This was not a tragic accident or a natural passing, but an intentional act that had unjustly taken a life. However, due to the harsh conditions of the ocean water, identifying the person initially proved to be an incredibly difficult task. Investigators meticulously searched for any distinguishing features that could return a name to the individual. In their careful examination, they discovered one crucial surviving detail: a small, specific tattoo resting quietly on the person's ankle. This single, indelible mark became the key to unlocking the mystery. Detectives immediately began cross-referencing the tattoo with recent missing person reports in the surrounding areas. It did not take long for them to find a match that perfectly aligned with the desperate, continuous pleas of a sister relentlessly searching for her younger brother. The authorities made the heavy, sorrowful phone call to Alicia Villegas. When they described the distinct ink on the ankle, the last fragile fragments of hope shattered. The family finally received the definitive, agonizing answer they had been dreading for weeks. The tattoo unequivocally confirmed that the person recovered from the bay was Omar. For Alicia and her mother, the confirmation brought a wave of unimaginable grief. It was a cruel and heartbreaking reality to accept. The discovery proved what Alicia had known in her heart all along. Omar had never chosen to walk away from his family, his life, or his future. He had not abandoned them. Instead, his vibrant life had been entirely and unjustly stolen from him in a senseless act, leaving behind a family forever changed by the loss. With the heartbreaking confirmation of Omar's identity, the investigation immediately shifted from a missing person search to a complex, full-scale pursuit of justice. Detectives now knew exactly where the tragedy had culminated, but they urgently needed to understand the sequence of events that led to the San Diego Bay. To bridge the gap between the gutted, bleach-soaked room in Chula Vista and the cold waters of the Pacific, investigators turned their attention to the silent, unblinking eyes of the city's surveillance network. The Port Authority and the surrounding marina were heavily monitored, providing a crucial digital archive of everything that moved in and out of the harbor. A dedicated team of forensic specialists and detectives began the painstaking process of scanning through hours of security video from the days immediately preceding the discovery of the barrel. Their meticulous patience paid off when they isolated a highly suspicious sequence of events. Dated October 11th, the cameras overlooking the jetty captured a distinct green Ford F-150 pickup truck pulling into the marina. Attached to the truck was a small bass tracker boat. This detail immediately stood out to experienced marine investigators. It was a lightweight vessel designed specifically for calm, freshwater lakes, making it dangerously out of place in the choppy, deep salt water of the ocean bay. As the footage progressed, the security cameras documented the boat being launched into the water. In the bed of the green truck, a large 55-gallon drum was clearly visible. Two unidentified figures were seen moving around the vehicle and the vessel. The boat then headed out past the breakwater, disappearing into the vast expanse of the harbor. However, it was the return trip that provided the most damning piece of physical evidence. Less than a single hour later, a duration far too short for any legitimate fishing excursion, the boat reappeared on the camera feed. As the vessel approached the dock, investigators noticed a stark, undeniable physical discrepancy. When comparing the before and after images side by side, it was glaringly obvious that the boat was now sitting significantly higher on the waterline. The immense weight it had carried out to sea was no longer on board. The heavy cargo had been discarded. While the marina footage established the timeline, the camera quality was unfortunately too grainy to clearly identify the faces of the individuals. The detectives refused to let the trail go cold. Utilizing surrounding business security cameras, they initiated a digital manhunt, painstakingly tracking the green pickup truck's route block by block as it left the harbor and merged onto the highway. Following this electronic breadcrumb trail, they eventually traced the vehicle to a local convenience store and gas station. Here, the high-definition security cameras finally provided the breakthrough they desperately needed. The footage showed the green truck pulling into the lot. The driver exited the vehicle and casually walked through the front doors of the store. He was wearing shorts, a maroon shirt, and a green hat. As he walked toward the cash register, the camera angle provided a clear, unobstructed view of his lower leg. Detectives immediately froze the frame and zoomed in. There, etched on the back of the driver's calf, was a highly distinct tattoo. It was a pattern the investigators instantly recognized. They pulled up the body camera footage from their initial welfare check at the Chula Vista property just weeks prior. The placement, the size, and the design matched perfectly. The man on the screen was undeniably Timothy Cook, Omar's evasive landlord. Furthermore, a deep dive into digital financial records soon revealed the tragic motive behind the entire cover-up. Omar had recently been awarded an $80,000 settlement, and Cook had been secretly accessing his banking information. The intricate puzzle was finally coming together, pointing directly to a devastating betrayal driven entirely by financial greed. The courtroom became the final stage where the painful truth was meticulously laid bare for the world to see. After years of agonizing waiting, The prosecution presented an airtight, undeniable case against Timothy Cook. Piece by piece, the timeline of betrayal was reconstructed using an overwhelming mountain of physical and digital evidence. The financial transactions served as the grim foundation of the prosecution's narrative. Digital records clearly demonstrated the motive, revealing unauthorized and calculated access to Omar's recent financial settlement. This was not a random tragedy, but a calculated act of greed. Furthermore, the extensive purchase history and security footage tracked the perpetrator's deliberate acquisition of specific cleaning materials, new drywall, and flooring from a local hardware store. This meticulous documentation of the cover-up proved beyond a shadow of a doubt the premeditated nature of his efforts to conceal his actions. The sheer volume of circumstantial and physical proof dismantled every lie he had told, leaving no room for reasonable doubt. Facing this impenetrable wall of evidence, the jury reached a decisive and unwavering conclusion, holding the perpetrator fully accountable for his actions. Timothy Cook was officially found guilty. Given his extensive prior criminal history, the legal system applied the absolute strictest measures available under the law to ensure public safety. He was handed a severe, uncompromising sentence of 56 years to life in a state penitentiary. This definitive ruling provided a crucial sense of closure. It ensured that he would be permanently removed from society, completely neutralizing any future threat he could ever pose to innocent people. The resounding strike of the judge's gavel marked the culmination of a harrowing legal journey, delivering the formal justice that Alicia and her dedicated family had fought so relentlessly to secure. The legal system had ultimately worked, but it was solely because a determined sister had forcefully set it into motion. Yet, the most profoundly moving and unforgettable moment of the entire trial did not come from the judge's bench or the attorney's closing arguments, but from Alicia herself. Taking the stand to deliver her final statement, she commanded the silent courtroom with a quiet, unbroken dignity. Facing the very man who had inflicted such unimaginable sorrow upon her family, she actively chose not to surrender to blind hatred or vengeful anger. Instead, she chose a path of extraordinary emotional fortitude. With immense strength, she publicly declared her forgiveness. She made it unequivocally clear to him, and to everyone present, that this profound act of grace was not meant to absolve him of his immense guilt, nor did it minimize the absolute devastation he had caused. Her forgiveness was a deliberate, powerful choice for her own spiritual liberation. She refused to carry the heavy, corrosive chains of bitterness for the rest of her life. By choosing to let go of the anger, she ensured that his darkness would not consume her spirit or her family's future. More importantly, this conscious decision allowed her to preserve the pure, radiant memory of Omar. She guaranteed that her brother's legacy would forever be defined by the beautiful, joyful love they shared, rather than the tragic circumstances of his departure. Her journey stands as an enduring testament to the unbreakable power of familial love.